Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the entire Georgia CASA team, I welcome you to the 2021 CASA Day at the Capitol virtual edition. As Georgia CASA's executive director, there are just a few days of each year when we get a chance to host all of you. For the last 20 years, through rain, snow, Atlanta traffic, and parking woes, we gleefully made our way to the Capitol, spent time with our Georgia elected officials, sat together in the gallery of the House and Senate chambers, shared many meals, handshakes, and yes, hugs, and got cozy on the Capitol steps with every one of our governors for our annual group photo. If there is any way to capture the energy and excitement generated from having 300 plus advocates come together to lift their voices virtually, the CASA network is going to make it happen. I hope that at the end of today's program, you will be inspired to share your unique perspective that comes from your CASA experience. Your voice is as important and relevant with elected officials as it is every day in the courtroom. But don't take my word for it. You'll hear from our state leaders about the critical role that advocates play in shaping policy and investments around issues directly impacting children and their families who must experience the foster care system. I offer a special thank you to our invited guests and partners who are joining us today from various state agencies, courts, policy and advocacy group and provider groups, youth advocates, and of course, all of our elected officials. We see you. Well, we see what you do and the value that you hold for volunteer advocacy and its impact at both the direct service level and with state advocacy efforts. Before I turn it over to Mandira Mehra and Georgia CASA's board chair and Angela Tyner, who is serving as our MC for today, I want to add my respect and admiration for each and every one of you. In the last 12 months, you never retreated from the critical relationships that were built with children who were more disconnected than ever before. You conceived new ways to encourage and inspire children and their caregivers, as well as the frontline workers working with directly with Georgia's families. You zoomed into court hearings, trainings, and board meetings. Together, we mourned the losses of too many of our friends, family, and irreplaceable Georgia leaders. You joined us in recognizing and speaking out against injustices and inequities that our Black and Brown families, colleagues, and children face. And you reminded us every day that there are thousands of Georgians who are deeply and forever changed as a result of their CASA involvement and who care unconditionally about children and families all across the state. Now, I'd like to officially kick off CASA Day at the Capitol by introducing Mandira Mehra, the Georgia CASA board chair, who has served on the Georgia CASA board for 6 years, in leadership roles for 4 years, and in the role of board chair through 2022. Mandira is a passionate advocate herself when not acting in her official capacity. When not acting in her official Georgia CASA capacity, she is the Chief Marketing Officer at MRI Software, a spouse and a mom of 2 school-age children. Mandira, welcome back to the CASA stage, and undoubtedly your first, like ours, virtual CASA Day at the Capitol.
Thank you, Jen, and good morning, everyone. CASA directors, volunteers, board members, and friends, thank you for joining us today, and more importantly, thank you for all you do to support the many thousands of children that experience foster care in Georgia each year. The work you do is critical to securing these children in safe, permanent, and loving homes, which is of course what we hope for every child, but also what we know is a prime driver of future outcomes. And this work has never been more critical than today in the midst of a global pandemic that has had severe financial and psychological impact on so many families, and on children in particular. Bellwether Education, a national nonprofit focused on dramatically changing education and life outcomes for underserved children, estimates that as many as 3 million of the most educationally marginalized children in the country may not have experienced any formal education virtual or in person, since March of 2020. They estimate that number could range from 3,500 to as high as 88,000 students in Georgia. These missing kids are those most likely to intersect with the child protection system at some point in their lives. You may be aware that the leadership and board of Georgia CASA recently published a new strategic plan and updated mission statement. Advancing child welfare system improvements is one of the 3 pillars of our new long-range plan, and your participation today directly supports that priority as we use our collective voice to advocate for Georgia's most vulnerable children at the Capitol. In the strategic plan, we identified 4 strategies through which Georgia CASA can advance child welfare system improvements, all of which will be in evidence today. The first strategy is to inform the network, our partners, legislators, and the general public about issues related to child welfare. For example, using data, tools, and systems to evaluate the impact of child welfare policies on child outcomes. The second strategy we identified is to cultivate relationships with the network, partners, legislators, and the general public. For example, seeking alliances with child, family, health, prevention, and child welfare-related organizations, agencies, and coalitions at the state and affiliate level, and engaging in broad discussions and developing relationships with decision makers, as we're doing today. The third strategy is to promote sound policy and financial investments in the child welfare system by leveraging the relationships of CASA advocates with partners, legislators, and decision makers to promote systematic changes, and advocating for social justice and race equity and diversity and inclusion practices in the child welfare system. And finally, the fourth strategy is for Georgia CASA to embrace our role as a thought leader in the child welfare system. For example, creating and driving opportunities for conversations and connections among key stakeholders, as we're doing today. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all that you do every day to support Georgia's children. And now I'll turn it over to Angela.
Thank you, Mandira, for your words today and for your support and leadership of CASA in Georgia. Good morning, everyone. Please sit back and relax. You'll see a split screen with the presenters, presentation, and videos, and you can adjust the view on your end depending on the device if you choose. On a computer, use your mouse and the screen divider to adjust the size of the 2 view boxes when they appear. On your tablet or phone, swipe between the different available views. To chat, choose your audience, the panelists or all participants. Please note that speakers will not be able to respond to questions during their live parts. To see who's here, scroll through the participant list, and wish us luck with managing all these different moving parts. For those of you who might not have gotten the chance to meet yet, I'm Angela Tyner, the Advocacy Director, and will be serving as your MC for the remainder of today's program. While I can't see you, I can feel your spirit and know you're excited for our day, ready to hear from our speakers, and are wearing a pop of red along with me. So even though we won't gather for that infamous photo on the North Wing steps, please take selfies and screenshots and still post your pictures to social media using our hashtag GACASADAY at CAP. As I've said in years past, seeing these photos offers an enjoyment when the event is over to scroll through and witness your highlights of the day. And this year, it helps us to feel a little more connected to one another. From our time spent together at the Capitol, we know firsthand the support for CASA advocacy we receive from our elected and appointed officials, and today we look forward to bringing you an informative and inspiring program. To kick us off, we have a special acknowledgement from Governor Kemp, who was unable to join us, but who has honored the CASA network by recognizing today is CASA Day. The proclamation will be read by returning Georgia CASA board member and previous board chair, Rod Walker, which we will share with you now.
By the Governor of the State of Georgia, a proclamation, Court-Appointed Special Advocates Day. Whereas in 1988, CASA began as Kids of Georgia Need Volunteers, Inc. 4 years later in 1992, the nonprofit's name was changed to Georgia CASA, Inc. And whereas Georgia CASA is dedicated to improving the lives of children in foster care throughout the state. By advocating for children who have experienced abuse or neglect, CASA volunteers work to amplify each child's voice and help change their story. And whereas Georgia CASA's 46 affiliate programs recruit, screen, train, and supervise CASA volunteers, specially trained adults who are appointed by the court to provide compassionate and individualized attention to help each child find a safe and permanent home. And whereas last year alone, nearly 2,800 CASA volunteers advocated for over 10,000 children in our state's legal custody. And whereas, as an external partner, Georgia CASA maximizes the resources and support available to children and families through increased community involvement and awareness, local and state advocacy efforts, and compassionate response efforts to children and families in crisis. And whereas on CASA Day and throughout the year, the state of Georgia is proud to recognize CASA volunteers for their selfless efforts and contributions made on behalf of Georgia's children. Now, therefore, I, Brian P. Kemp, Governor of the state of Georgia, do hereby proclaim February 11, 2021 as CASA Day in Georgia. Thank you and enjoy your day.
With the foundation for today's agenda set, and with recognition from the governor and from our leadership for all that you do for Georgia's children in foster care, we turn now to hearing from not one, but 3 women who are passionate about policy changes and investments to improve the experiences of children and families within the child welfare system. And when it comes to Georgia's child welfare system, Gabrielle Willis is a champion of change. Gabrielle is a young adult who uses her voice and shares her foster care experience with many professionals and stakeholders through trainings, conferences, and events. Last year, Gabrielle became one of the founding board members of the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services' first Child Advocacy Board, now known as Georgia Peer Advocates for Change, or GPAC. This board is comprised of youth who are currently or formerly in foster care, and its goal is to make positive systemic improvements through legislation and peer support for current and future youth who must experience foster care. Since serving on the board, Gabrielle has used her voice to speak boldly in advocating for change. She says authentic youth engagement is the secret sauce to improving the system for others still experiencing it. She challenges policy and decision makers to look deeper, to seek to understand why a child or youth acts as she does. Due to her dedication and motivation to make a difference in helping youth have a positive experience in foster care, Gabrielle was recently elected by her peers as GPAC's first president. She serves in this position proudly and is grateful to have the opportunity to take part in this important work to make a difference within the child welfare system. Gabrielle is also a recent graduate from the University of West Georgia, where she earned a bachelor's degree in mass communication, film and video with a minor in sociology. Please join me in welcoming Gabrielle Willis. Gabrielle, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I just want to say I'm so happy to be here because this is incredibly important. When I first got the email asking me to do this, I was incredibly elated. I was feeling myself. I was like confident. I'm like, me? Like, this is amazing. And then the fear set in, this is really, really big for me. And I had no idea what I was going to say. I was reassured that I didn't have to talk about my personal experience, that it was going to be more about the legislative side. But I slowly started to realize that they are connected. They go hand in hand. And I wouldn't even have a personal experience to talk about without this important legislation. So here's my heart. My life could have turned out much differently. Sometimes I get scared to think about it, if I would even be here. Last week, I was invited to my first policy review meeting. It was essentially trying to ensure that our young people who may need additional support with making decisions get the support they need when they ask for it. I read through that policy with a fine-toothed comb. I was so nervous. I even called one of our adult supporters from the board because I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. But she reassured me, and so I came with all my notes and all of my questions. And I felt like I needed to apologize for what I was being asked to do. You know, I felt like I was being annoying. But the people in that meeting, they helped me understand and remember what we were doing there. It's important. It wasn't about me. So being extra was definitely needed. What I was doing there, especially as a former foster kid, it's important. And it's the same reason why I'm here today. Somebody, and honestly, probably one of those people, at least in that Zoom meeting, and maybe some of you at some point, sat at a table together, pre-Rona, of course, and did their diligence. So I had a safe group home to live in. I had a therapist because of somebody's diligence. I got to stay with my sister because of somebody's diligence. Whether you realize it or not, coming together to create legislation, the way I see it, we are all, in a way, the invisible parent. We are trying to create rules, make sure these kids have support, money, and the guidance that they need to live their lives in care and beyond. We all have the same goal for them to be happy, successful, and the opportunity to learn from their mistakes like any parent would want, you know? I was in my last placement for a year before I went off to college. You think 18-year-olds are already a little slow on the uptake. I definitely was. I felt like I was already kind of behind my peers, but I wouldn't even had the opportunity to go and graduate from college and learn from my mistakes if there were not people who sat in those meetings like I did last week. I'm sure my independent living specialist, Ms. Jerica, was not always grateful to get my 5 calls in a row when I needed something, but I am incredibly grateful to have had the opportunity to be that annoying to somebody. It meant everything. If there was no net and a group of people like all of us looking out for people like me, my mistakes might have been detrimental. The determining factor in this is access to help. That's what makes the difference, to make sure those things aren't detrimental for kids like me. What we are all doing here today, day in and day out, it's incredibly important. Working on legislative action is impacting the livelihood of these youth. It affects their current reality and their everyday lives, and it can determine what kind of future that they have. It definitely did for me. Thank you to all those people who sat in those meetings and asked annoying questions. So I now can be the president of GPAC, Georgia Peer Advocates for Change, the board for current and former foster youth for the state, and do things like talk to you today. I now, as a member of GPAC, get to sit in, speak, and ask questions at policy meetings. I get to speak on panels, and I get to speak at things because of legislative action. It was one of the most important things that got me to this point in my life. I have a life, and I love my life right now, you know? The day that you were tired in that meeting, please remember that you were working hard to change things for a kid like me. Thank you for what happened to you, good or bad, in your life, the choices that you make that brought you here to this moment today to listen to me talk about all this. It matters. So thank you for your choice to be here today. Thank you.
Wow. Gabrielle, thank you so much for your words. We are inspired for the future and grateful for your willingness to use your experience to shape the system and make improvements for those who are coming up behind you. Our next speaker, Representative Katie Dempsey, has been a member of the House of Representatives since 2007 and represents the City of Rome and additional areas in Floyd County. Since she's been elected, she has taken on a number of leadership roles, including currently serving as chairman of the Appropriations Human Resources Subcommittee. Chairwoman Dempsey also serves on the committees of Economic Development and Tourism, Energy, Utilities and Telecommunications, Health and Human Services, Higher Education, Rules, and Transportation. In addition to her House leadership positions, she serves by appointment of the Speaker of the House on a number of councils, works with regional and national leadership organizations, and has served on the boards of numerous organizations within her community. She self-describes her role as handling the heartfelt issues at the Capitol. She is especially passionate about mental health for all ages and knows that we must focus on trying to prevent the outcomes we've seen and recognize mental illness as a true but treatable challenge. Chairwoman Dempsey calls for us to reflect that once upon a time, we were all children. To remember what that felt like and what our met and unmet needs were, she says we must look out for our youngest citizens who will one day take care of us in Georgia. Let's hear from Chairwoman Dempsey now.
Hi, it's so good to at least talk to you. I wish we were together, but welcome to this virtual day at the Capitol. For some of Georgia's most important volunteers, that's who you are. I'm well aware of the work that you do and the challenges you've faced, the unique challenges during this time that we are going through together. But you have persevered. You have given everything you could. You found creative and innovative ways to stay in touch with children who need you to do that. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your commitment, for your advocacy, for your perseverance, for all that you have done to work with the partners in your own communities, to work with the children and the families, to be patient and to figure out how we can do this in a whole new and different unexpected time. You are the heartbeat for many of these children, and we know that. Your work in all of our 156 counties to deal with children who have been abused and neglected. There's nothing more important. When that child is alone, facing the separation, the scary times ahead, to have the friend that I know that each of you can be in the courtroom and through the networks and the friends that you bring to the table for each and every child and family. Thank you so much. Your advocacy, your impact on our budget, on everything that we do is so important. But I want you to know that not every legislator is probably as familiar as you and I wish they would be with CASA. So I want to ask you today, soon after this day, to please reach out. Give your state representative and senator a call. Set up a meeting, a Zoom meeting, or at least talk on the phone. And let's hope that soon, very soon, they can actually meet in person with you and meet some of the volunteers that are doing this very important work that is life-saving and life-impacting. So thank you. May God continue to guide your steps, your hands and your heart to continue to help our Georgia and our Georgia's children. Your work matters greatly. Thank you. God bless you.
Chairwoman Dempsey reminds us that we won't ever meet anyone in state government who doesn't care greatly about our collective future that is held in the hands of children, of the importance for our legislators to hear from you, our CASA network, to help share what the needs are and what we can do to pull together for all children and families. Our next speaker, Representative Shelley Hutchinson, has been a member of the Georgia House of Representatives since 2019. A resident of Gwinnett County since 1995, she was born and raised in New Orleans. She credits her family and Catholic faith in instilling in her the values of honesty, commitment, and leadership from a young age. Representative Hutchinson is a member of the committees of Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight, Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, Health and Human Services, and Juvenile Justice. She began her lifelong career in social services and child welfare by working for Fulton County DFACS, and she holds a master's degree in social work. Representative Hutchinson serves as chair of the local interagency planning team and CHINS committee, and she assists local leaders in providing access to unconventional supports for children in need of behavioral health services. She also belongs to organizations like Together Georgia, the National Association of Social Workers, and the Georgia Society for Clinical Social Work. Last but not least, Representative Hutchinson founded the Social Empowerment Center, a mental health and social services outreach and treatment center located in Lawrenceville that supports families through difficulties that frequently involve court-ordered services. The center is proud to provide services that strengthen children and families, and in turn, strengthen communities. Please join me in welcoming Representative Hutchinson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a great introduction. makes me sound better than I think I actually am. I am so grateful for CASA. Like was mentioned earlier, I started my career at DFACS. I was a child protective services worker. I did my master's degree with school social work, and my internship was doing investigations and foster care. So I have been familiar with CASA since pretty much day one of my career, and they have been so helpful. I mean, the CASA voice comes from a place that's different from DFACS to Department of Juvenile Justice or attorneys. You come from a place of a volunteer, you come with your heart on your sleeve. And that is something that is so needed when we go to court and when we work with families to try to either keep them together or reunify them, or just strengthen them. The CASAs are just, we can't state enough how important you are. And when Chairwoman Dempsey mentioned that you help the budget, if you weren't volunteers, we would either be paying a lot more for less service, or the service would be just discontinued completely. And I'm sure you know how important your work is and how impactful it is. I've seen so many CASAs do so many great things and really be more of an advocate sometimes than anyone else in the courtroom. But I did want to talk to you about advocating for policy. The first thing I would tell any group is do not cut and paste emails from an automatic email generator. That is the worst way to get your point across. The best way to do it is personally. During COVID, I don't suggest anyone go to the Capitol. In normal times, I would suggest meeting whoever your representatives are, your representatives, your senator, even the governor does, take messages, phone calls, and sometimes he does take appointments to advocate. And I would also, it's very easy to create a bill. If you have a specific idea, come to me or even Katie Dempsey, Chairwoman Dempsey, and it's super easy to create a bill. The work comes after creating the bill, asking the chairperson of the committee that it's been assigned to hear it, getting sponsors for it, and pushing it along the lines. That is the real work. So you can really start your own bill or find one that you support and follow it along the steps. There is, behind the scene politics that, none of us are real happy with. There's a lot of relationship building, and but it's worth it in the end. Sometimes it'll take years to get something really simple passed, but in the end, you know that it's worth it. And anytime CASA throws their support behind something, we know it's for the good of the children. So anything you do, I would do it personally, like a phone call, a handwritten letter, an email that's personal. To give you an example, during the whole, probably from early November until still really now, we were legislators, all of us, all representatives, all state senators were getting automatically generated emails for Stop the Steal. And it was so overwhelming that we had to get IT to come in to funnel those messages to one location, because we were getting several emails, cut and paste emails that said the same thing. We were getting several every minute of every day. Ultimately, when IT had to come in and funnel all those messages into one place, none of those voices were heard. And it's easy to tell if it's a cut and paste email because the subject is the same thing every single time. Even if there's a typo, the typo would be there every single time. So it's a cut and paste email. I would suggest anything you do it in person. When COVID is over, come down to the Capitol, advocate. No one dislikes hearing about children. So come down here, talk to us. That is the best way to advocate. And I've seen you guys in court, so I know how you advocate, and I know that you could advocate here just as well.
All right, well, thank you, Representative Hutchinson. We appreciate your support of children and families and of CASA during the session and the time and advice you gave us today. I want to make sure that you were finished with your remarks.
Yes, I was going to take some questions if anybody had any questions.
Well, I don't know if anybody had any questions in the chat. I had told them that our live speakers wouldn't be able to answer them.
Oh, sorry.
But I think the advice
No,
you gave us, I don't know if you could see me nodding along, but I was nodding along with your legislative advocacy tips. And I'm sure they will not remember that they have heard some of those same things from me, but certainly it means a lot more coming from an elected official and someone with your stature and support of CASA. So thank you so much for your time. I know that the morning orders and everything got bumped up today, so
yes, it did.
we were able to get you in, but thank you so much.
Not a problem, anytime.
Great, thanks. So speaking of the legislative session, today we are in legislative day 16 of 40 down at the Capitol. And like all of us, the General Assembly has adapted to keep our lawmakers safe while they tackle the budget and unprecedented issues at the Capitol. So here with us to talk a little bit about how it looks under the Gold Dome is our legislative consultant, Wendy Clifton. We have had the pleasure of working with Wendy for 18 years now and continue to be in awe of her knowledge, relationships, and respect at the Capitol. A key strategist and negotiator, Wendy has unparalleled expertise and a tenacious, results-driven demeanor. Her lobbying career has spanned over 2 decades, and she continues to help her more than 70 clients navigate the complexities of political consulting and policy development issues, including healthcare, juvenile justice, child welfare, and appropriations. Wendy's comprehensive understanding of policy and logistics, coupled with her intentional planning and strategy, leads to her clients' success. Together, we have successfully worked to strengthen the standing of CASA and the GAL under the Juvenile Code and seen the CASA Network's appropriation reach its current $3.58 million level. We remain appreciative of Wendy's support and no-nonsense sound counsel. Wendy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Angela. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Can
can
you
now.
see me? Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So hope everybody's doing great. These are awkward, weird times. We walk around the Capitol these days with one of these on. And so I'm used to talking to legislators like this, but I'm in an office with the door shut, and so I can take it off. It's a challenge. The COVID environment is difficult. It's hard to, get with legislators. A lot of our work, as you all know, is done in the hallways and on the elevator, and, a 30-second conversation here and a 3-minute conversation there and in passing. And a lot of that has been very difficult with COVID for a lot of different reasons. One, you can't hear each other very well. 2, in the hallways, it's really loud. And 3, there are just a lot of members who have so far been COVID free and are trying to keep themselves and their families safe. And so they don't want to meet in person at all. And so a Zoom 30-minute call, it now takes the place of a 5-minute call that I at one point in time had in the hallway. That was a whole lot simpler and easier, and it was on the fly, and it didn't require a scheduling appointment, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly difficult, but there are a good number of folks down here. The legislators are required to be tested twice a week, and we have free testing available on campus as well. And so everybody is working really hard, I think, at keeping each other safe and trying to make sure that we don't spread the virus in this building, which happened, as you may recall, last year when the virus first came about. And they came back in for that special session. There were a bunch of legislators who ended up contracting the virus. So that's obviously first and foremost in everybody's mind. And as I speak, I just put my hand sanitizer on my hands because I haven't done that yet since I've been in the building for the last hour or so. As far as issues go, you know, one thing I tell y'all every year, what's the number one thing the legislature has to do, and that's the budget. And so we are in the final phases of the amended FY21 budget, which is the mid-year budget that takes us through the end of this year, through the end of June. They will begin their debate and discussion on the FY22 budget in earnest. Probably, well, there are committee meetings that actually subcommittee meetings that begin today and tomorrow. And so that's beginning in the House as we speak right now. And we will, as always, be monitoring those conversations and paying attention to all things that are funding related to our child welfare work over at the Department of Family and Children's Services. The other kind of big, and I'll say this too, we just got revenue numbers for January, and revenues were up 7.5%. So that's really, really positive news on the budget writing front. And what that means is if the economy stays on an upward trend on revenues, then that means that, you know, it's a very good chance that our CASA dollars that are in the DFACS budget annually will stay untouched. The governor's budget instructions from back in the fall required a flat budget for agencies. So no increases, but also no decreases. And so that's very, very good for our line item. And so we will be monitoring all that closely, as we always do, and keep you updated on any issues that arise that affect your CASA programs across the state. There's a good bit of legislation out there this year that has an impact on foster care, adoption services, child welfare generally. We are monitoring all of those, as we always do. And you know, there's always an interest, right, in trying to take better care of the children that are in the state's custody. And so it's important that we as advocates, not just in the juvenile court child welfare system, but just generally, we try to stay on top of things. We work with all of our partners in the hallways, whether it's the Barton Center or the folks over at Voices for Georgia's Children or the Children's Advocacy Centers, all those different groups that you guys also work with in the local community, like Family Connection. We work with all those groups in order to try to shore each other up and make sure that we all know what's going on. And so there's a lot of open communication there with all those different organizations and trying to make sure that good policy happens down here and that bad things don't end up getting through the process. And then in terms of the climate, I will talk about politics and partisanship for a minute. You know, our nation has been through a tremendous amount of challenge, really, with the last election and then the runoffs that we just had here in January. And I will say to you that for the vast majority of legislators that I see and work with every day, partisanship is not their number one priority. It's not first on their mind. It's not something they really think about. But there is a lot of partisanship, unfortunately, that is happening as a result of the elections and kind of where we are as a nation right now in the angst of, you know, just the shift away from the 45th president to now President Biden, and as well the outcome of the 2 U.S. Senate races here in Georgia. And so that pivots us then into election reform, which has turned out to be, probably will be before session is over, the biggest issue that we will be dealing with. And I say we, I do have some work that I will be doing in that arena, but it's a new conversation for me even. We don't have election reform debates down here very often. As a matter of fact, the last time we did anything substantial was the creation of the early voting system, advanced voting, if you will. And I actually had the pleasure of speaking with then Secretary of State Kathy Cox, who was neck deep in getting that done. And she reminded me that it took 5 years for that early advanced voting process to actually get full approval and all the way through the legislative process. And so none of these discussions are easy, right? Because you want to maintain a fairly level playing field, because today the Republicans are the majority in the House and Senate and the governor's office and your constitutional offices. But in 10 years, that may not be the case. And so if you change the law in an election world too much, you could end up having dire impacts for one party or the other at a later date that was never foreseen. What we call unintended consequences in the legislative process down here. And so that's going to be, I think, starting next week, as we move into the later legislative days in the process, you're going to see and hear more and more about election reform, election proposals. And it's everything from mail-in ballots and verification of identity to the Dropbox locations, to just shoring up the general integrity of the election process in Georgia. And I really believe that's where we're going to end up in this conversation, but it's going to be probably a challenging conversation, probably going to be a very partisan conversation in a lot of circumstances. And you know, my role, as y'all know, for working for Georgia CASA and you lovely people for all these years has always been very, very bipartisan. I believe the issue of children and families and child welfare and what we do for the foster care population in this state is very, very bipartisan. And matter of fact, I think it's nonpartisan. I don't know a legislator who doesn't understand that doing what's in the child's best interest is partisan at all. It's about doing the right thing. And I believe that there are a lot of legislators, the majority of them down here, that have that purview. And so hopefully they can carry over that bipartisanship and ability to try to just work together. And, you know, at the end of the day, much of what we do down here is negotiated. It's compromised. Nobody ever gets everything that they want. And I remember way back in, I think it was 2007, when we passed our Georgia CASA bill. This is before the juvenile code rewrite. And we had conversations with members around, you know, we really need this, but we can live with this. And that's the art of compromise down here at the Capitol. And I'm really optimistic and hopeful that our state leadership in the House and Senate and throughout this building can really rely on just doing what's in the best interest of Georgians collectively and not making the election reform conversation so incredibly partisan and therefore, you know, angst and anger and not the kind of conciliatory conversation that you really want to see amongst lawmakers. And so, you know, at the end of the day, we are on, and Angela just said this, we're on day 16. We're still early in the process, but things are really, in the last week or so, we've really picked up. We have a schedule that takes us through legislative day 25 right now, and that takes us through the early part of March. I anticipate the House will get busy on the budget next week with earnest, and we will see the budget on the floor, the big budget, the FY22 budget, on the floor of the House the last week of February. And you know, that's kind of where we are. So happy to take any questions, Angela. I don't know if you want to take some questions that are in the chat box. I'm happy to do that. Or, you know, if you've got questions for me, I'm happy to take those as well. So let me know how I can help.
No, I think we're set, Wendy. I had told them earlier that we wouldn't be taking questions for our speakers.
Okay,
so now a couple of you guys have
My
offered
bad.
that up. But I appreciate, and as always, your keen insight and perspective about what to expect during the remainder of the session. It's just a little different down there.
Just a little different. That's exactly right. So unfortunately, I have to put my mask back on and go back out into the hallways. And but thank you guys. Listen, I can't say thank you enough for what y'all do every day. The work that you do on the front lines with your collaboration between the court and DFACS and all the other parties that are involved in the cases that you guys represent, whether you're a supervisor, a coordinator, a volunteer yourself. Thank you for the work that you do. Georgia's children can't do without you, and we need you to keep doing what you do every day to give them the best shot that they can get at having their best interests represented. And I just can't thank you enough. And I know that I say that for me, but I know I say that for a lot of legislators down here too, who know you, know the work that you do. And just so thank you. Keep doing it. Keep up the great work, even during this crazy COVID time. And look forward to seeing you guys next year, because we'll be back at the Capitol. I'm optimistic about that.
All right, Wendy. Well, thanks so much, and I appreciate we appreciate your support, and certainly I echo the things that you said, that the relationships that you all in the CASA network have with our elected officials makes our jobs a lot easier.
A lot easier. Yeah. Keep up the great work. Y'all have a great day.
All right. Thanks so much, Wendy. All right, guys. Well, we know that the legislators, of course, are not the only ones who made adaptations to their practice because of COVID. This year has taught us so much about perseverance, adaptability, and resiliency. As a thank you and appreciation for the many ways that you have stepped up and continued to fill the gap for children, families, and the system we serve by remaining connected and accessible, we wanted to highlight your steadfast efforts. Let's watch together now. We know the critical role that you, our CASA advocates, play in family support is more critical than ever. It's why days like today are so important to continue to bring immediate attention to the needs of children and their families and caregivers, both during this ongoing pandemic and moving forward. So, as we turn our attention back to the legislative session at hand, on a year where we were unsure what to expect legislatively, there have already been several bills introduced that focus on foster care and adoption reform. Governor Kemp recently announced his foster care initiatives for 2021 that increase Georgia's adoption tax credit and lower the required age to adopt. We're closely following SB 28, which among other things streamlines the juvenile code to ensure all reliable information is made available to the juvenile court in order to make decisions in a child's best interests. We appreciate the governor's commitment to shining a light on issues important to children experiencing foster care. As to the budget, as Wendy has mentioned, because of the governor and General Assembly's assertive actions and cuts that the agencies endured last year at the onset of the pandemic, this year's instructions largely involved holding our agency's budgets constant at their previous levels. In addition, we were happy to hear Speaker Ralston announce yesterday a $1,000 bonus to all frontline defects workers, acknowledging their sacrifices and hard work with our most vulnerable families during this ongoing public health emergency. For our Georgia CASA allocation, we expect to make a modest, targeted ask to support our final geographic expansion and reinstate the funds previously designated to the CASA network. Because we couldn't page our legislators or hold our annual luncheon today, it's more important than ever to schedule legislative appointments to discuss these important issues. On the CASA Day at the Capitol website, there are 2 letters, one for freshman legislators and one for returning legislators that can be customized to request an appointment. You heard from Representative Hutchinson the importance of customizing these letters. We don't want to be one of those situations where we have the same exact typo on every single letter that they receive. So please customize those letters before that you send them. If you're not sure who your legislator is, There are tools on the website that can help with that identification too. With the election and pandemic, our representatives and senators have gotten way more mail than usual. So if you find that your email doesn't get a response, definitely call and speak to their aides and reach out and request that appointment in another way. I also did want to share that while perishable items were not permitted with COVID restrictions, so we couldn't provide our traditional s'mores, each legislator did receive a CASA mask in their office today, noting CASA Day at the Capitol. We expect and have started to see some additional legislative proposals, in addition to the ones I just mentioned a bit ago, that may or may not gain traction. So prior to your visits with your legislators, check with us, our CASA Day at the Capitol website, or the weekly legislative updates prepared by the Barton Center or Voices for the current bill's status and language. Once your appointment is set, we have prepared some talking points to guide the conversation that can be accessed on the CASA Day at the Capitol website. First, we want to share our appreciation for their ongoing support. The legislature's investment has provided a strong foundation for CASA advocacy. Even if you have a freshman legislator, it's important to acknowledge that this support and increase has helped our funding through the years and has allowed us to serve additional children experiencing care. You can talk about your affiliate's momentum, how the pandemic has impacted your operations, but also how CASA has continued to persevere and serve families in spite of the recent challenges. Engage your legislator in the CASA network. Offer them the opportunity to attend court or a training session or an event. Their participation is just as important and eye-opening virtually as it was in person. Bring attention to the needs of children and families in your community. This could be the challenges that always face the system or ones that have surfaced during the pandemic. Personalize the issues with non-identifying anecdotes and share how CASA and the community have come together. And lastly, offer to be a resource on child welfare issues throughout the session and beyond. This is consistent with our strategy of advancing systemic improvements that Mandira Mehra mentioned earlier. I know we talked about some pending legislation a few minutes ago and suggested being familiar with the current status of these bills before your appointments, but please don't worry so much about those technical details. It's my experience that no matter how much you prepare, without fail, they will ask you about a bill or an issue that's not even on your radar. Just say you'll look into it and get back with them shortly, and then follow up within a day or so with the information that which they inquired. Always remember that we're here to serve as a resource to you about these issues as well. Before I turn it over to Jen for our call to action and to close us out, I'll make one final reminder. If you haven't done so already, take and share them to social media using hashtag #GACASADayAtCap. We're looking forward to seeing your photos. Jen, I believe we're ready for our call to action.
All right, Angela. Well, I really just want to say ditto to everything that has been said today, but I was asked to use very strong action words in this call to action. So I'll close with a few comments and we'll end a little bit early and get you on your way to be able to start talking with your legislators. So I can only reiterate what's already been said about the importance of your voice, both in the courtroom and in the halls of the Capitol. You represent an important constituency that has both influence and access. You are equipped with everything you need to bring awareness and make connections with Georgia's elected officials to the critical issues facing families. Take with you the inspiration from today, right? I mean, Gabrielle, can you right? She says, it matters, it matters. I mean, so beautiful. Take with you the inspiration from today about how CASA advocacy can and has impacted not only our policy and laws, but has made Georgia stronger each day. Never forget that your CASA service has provided you with an insider's understanding of how our state and communities support and strengthen families. And yes, sometimes fail, but keep on because our future is at stake. In short, be you, your bold, confident selves. Enjoy your upcoming visits with elected officials. Share what you hear and learn, and keep in contact with us throughout the legislative session to follow pertinent legislation and receive budget updates. Thank you for being such an important part of change and advocacy for children and families at all levels. As we close out today, I share a final thanks to all who were a part of this day, to all of you for joining us, for our speakers, Gabrielle Willis, Chairwoman Dempsey, Representative Hutchinson, Rod Walker, Mandira Mera, Wendy, and our MC, Angela, to the governor and his office, and to our behind the scenes crew, the Georgia CASA team, who put their all into any and every CASA gathering. Thank you for what you do for the state network. We want to leave you with some of our fondest memories of our time together at the Capitol, and with the determination and persistence that fuels the CASA network to be back together under the Gold Dome in 2022. So thank you to all. My watch told me it's time to stand. So to the Georgia CASA team, stand up and take a bow and roll the photos.